Hi and welcome back. Today we are watching 25 misconceptions about the United States. I'm totally excited to see this because, there are so many misconceptions, let's be honest, right? Like everybody's fat or all that stuff, right? And to see what America really is like is always my goal here on this channel. So I really like exactly those videos. If you like this too, then make sure to hit a like and a subscribe, that more people see this. Thank you so much for that. And if you want to see more of me, check out my Patreon. I hope to post there more in the next few weeks, because literally in 3 hours I will head on a plane. Because literally in 3 hours I will take a plane to Bulgaria.
The United States often draws a lot of flack from the rest.
Let's be honest. I don't know if you hear it in the background. It's a little bit quiet, but the American anthem is a really, really beautiful one. I think it's probably like in my top 5 of anthems. Yeah, I would say so.
The world for everything. From its foreign policy to the way it runs its domestic affairs. In fact, it seems like there are few things that can divide the world more evenly and more strongly than asking people what their opinion is of the United States. Everyone has an opinion.
Yeah.
Even in the same city, you'll meet people who fall on the extreme sides of the spectrum. But what is it exactly that causes America to be so messed up? Even America's own politicians can't seem to stop talking about how messed up things are. Well,
that's of course their job, because then they try to say, but I would do it better, and then I get elected, right? So it's, even if everything would be fine, they probably would try to complain.
Today, we're going to take a deeper look. Are things really as bad as everyone seems to think they are? I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 common misconceptions about the United States that simply aren't true. And as a very important note, this list was produced by both a United States citizen and 2 European citizens that relocated to the United States.
Okay.
It's written to be as fair as possible.
Okay.
No, I'm not 2 Europeans. Or am I?
No, you're not.
All right, let's begin with a really common thought. Americans are ignorant about the world. Americans are held to an unrealistic standard. Since the rest of the world watch our movies and listen to our music, they know a lot about our country.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, they never studied it. People actually...
So I would say actually the US is probably the country that I know the most about in the world, and where I never have lived in. Of course, I know maybe more about Austria because I've lived in Austria. But otherwise, yeah, it's true. I probably know nothing more about any other country than the United States.
Complain that Americans don't even know that Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. But neither does half the United Kingdom, and they're on the same continent.
I hope British people know that, because that would be very, very bad. And I think also most Americans know this, right? But that is always a cliche a little bit with Europeans, because if you ask a European about a few African countries, right, and where they are, if it's not like Egypt, but like a little bit lesser known, they struggle so hard. They struggle so hard. Or like more like, for example, here, Latin America, right? I think probably most Americans know a lot more about Latin America and its geography than Europeans do. So, of course, Europeans know more about European countries because, they're neighbors, literally. So I would always take this with a grain of salt.
It turns out that all of us are pretty bad at geography. You'd think America would be better at it, however, considering another common thought is that America spends its days spying on everyone. And that's true.
Yeah, that is actually true.
Who doesn't? Germany, France, Switzerland.
Yeah, Germany doesn't really, because we're too bad for it.
Japan, Iceland, and all the rest of us spy on each other and ourselves. Moving on, America has been called racist. Please don't take this the wrong way. Racism definitely exists, and it makes the news. But you know what else? America also has a vicious media, and all of the world watches it.
True.
Sometimes more than their own media. So when something super bad happens in other countries, it might not even make the back page. Next, it's a common misconception.
I would actually say, sorry that I always stop, but that are very important points that he makes. That like the whole race thing is in America very different from what we have in Europe. And also, I don't know, like everything with race gets just cooked up way more in America than it would be in Germany, for example. Although I think like the passive racism actually like in Germany or in other countries can be harder or more, or it's more like I don't know, things in America are often more like a little bit more active maybe. And therefore you think it's bigger, although it's not. And in Germany, it's more like, you know, you get maybe a little bit less good grade or something like this, right? A little bit worse grade. You maybe don't get, you know, there's also cases in Germany where, you know, we only want to rent our apartment to white people or something like this, right? Not that against black, it's more than probably against Muslims, because we have literally no black people in Germany, or not many. I think 1% or something.
That Americans don't use public transport. While it's true that we use cars a lot, many regions in America have great public transport, or at least just as good as Europe. Besides, what good is a train if nobody can afford it? We're looking at you, UK.
Yeah, UK.
Please hit like and subscribe. It would help me so much. Thank you.
Moving on. America does /has /is fill in the blank. America is far from being a unified entity.
Yeah.
Each state has its own laws, cultures, and quirks. Some states have the death penalty. Some don't. Some have strict gun laws, and some don't.
Didn't know that this depends on the you know, on the state. Oh my god, that is so bad. Then I would never want to get, you know, sued in a state with a death penalty. That is, that's not great.
Have free college. Some don't. Some have tax, and yeah, some don't. So just like you can't say Europe is so-and-so, you can't say the same about the US.
Yeah.
As an additional note, the states are far more independent than many of us realize. In fact, every state even has its own military, known as the Guard. Furthermore, some states pass legislation that directly contradicts the federal government. This is because in the US, the federal government is not the highest authority, the states are.
Oh, what? Oh, that is totally different. Or in Germany, I had law in school. I wanted at some point to become a lawyer, so I'm pretty good with law. And there's a German saying like, federal law always breaks state law. So basically, federation is always superior, basically. And above this is even EU law, but that is, that's complicated. So crazy. In the US, it's the other way around. Interesting.
To further establish the fact that America isn't a single entity, many believe that Americans only speak one language. But that's no different from the rest of the world. Have you ever been to France?
Yeah.
Or the UK or Italy, or how about China?
Yeah.
Most of them only speak one language too.
Yeah.
That being said, over 20% of the US is bilingual.
And especially if you go to Eastern Europe, and you think you want to, literally, I was in Bratislava, which is 2 kilometers away, 2 kilometers of the Austrian border. Everybody in Bratislava goes to Vienna to work there because, way more earnings, very higher wages. Nobody there, despite that, could speak German or English. They are 2 kilometers away. It's not like that's 1 mile. So yeah, this is actually true that many other countries do not speak many languages. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the military, because people outside the US will preach that America's military does, again, fill in the blank. Nobody is naive enough to think that the US doesn't have selfish interests in mind when it invades a country.
Yes.
There isn't a nation on earth that would do that selflessly. But whenever the bad goes down, it's just as common for other countries to complain that America should do something. On a more or less lighter note,
it was always, some wars I think that the US did are dumb, especially if many things that they did in the Middle East. But in general, I always, somebody lately asked me, oh my God, if you would remove one country, what would it be? And don't say France or Russia, because, France, nobody likes France, and Russia, because obviously. So I said China. They were like, not the US. And I'm like, no, because actually I like our big buddy, They are pretty cool, and they help to protect us. Of course, now we protect each other like more here, Germany. More military spending. But I don't know. It's still most of the time they did, self-interest, but also greater good. I think.
Americans are fat. You ever been to the UK lately? There are even scandals because obese patients are getting turned down for surgery. Yes, America does have an obesity problem. But not all citizens are involved in it. I am. A big part of the United States is fairly health conscious and is consistently working to help the overweight population better their lives. Thanks, healthy people. And while we aren't perfect, many complain that America is worse than other developed nations in, well, everything. There are many statistics, child mortality, literacy, etc., where the US falls behind countries like Norway and Iceland. But those statistics are based on averages. In Norway, most of the 5 million inhabitants are rich, white, and Norwegian. If you took a similar sample of rich, white Americans in the US, you would find that the statistics are almost exactly the same. The fact is that the US is hugely diverse, and the American experience is completely different with and without money. Translation? The problem isn't healthcare or education, it's economic inequality, almost exclusively. And speaking of inequality, many make the simple but powerful assumption that America just isn't safe. This is usually what foreign citizens say until they actually come here. By this same logic, Paris brought...
We have the same, I have also many Poles that know me, and they say exactly the same about Germany. And actually, lately, it's get a little bit more unsafe. But it's exactly the same thing. Actually, you never worry about this, and you don't feel unsafe at all. Of course, maybe some statistics, but most of this, when somebody has like 1 rape per 100,000 citizens, right? And the other ones have 5, then, oh my God, it's 5 times more dangerous. Yeah, it's 5 per 100,000, That is no relation. So, I don't know, those statistics are always,
London, Madrid, and almost every other city in Europe is unsafe as well. Yes, there are guns, but most Americans have never seen or heard a gun being fired. In fact, most Swiss citizens are much more familiar with gunfire than us Americans. All this being said so far, people still expect...
But a little bit in a different way, but yeah, that is true.
All Americans to relish in a life of our stereotypes.
Because, in Switzerland, it's like you have the freedom for guns, right, to bear arms. And in the Swiss, it's a duty. They actually need to because they don't have really a military. It's like, every man needs also to shoot multiple times a year from the government to be good as a soldier in case of, war. So it's actually more like a duty than a freedom. And so I think it's true, but that is the reason why there are so many guns, because it's mandatory.
Guns, fast food, and freedom! What I'm saying is a lot of the world looks at America as overly patriotic. But here's an honest question. Have you ever met a Russian, Australian, a proud member of the UK? There's no shame in having pride in your country. Us Americans
I would say Russians way too patriotic, yeah. I haven't felt this so far with Australians or with British people. And with Americans, I would say they're more patriotic than many European countries, especially Western European countries, except France, or especially Germany, let's say like this.
Patriotic. But so is the rest of the world, as they should be. It's not a crime to be proud of where you came from. But that doesn't stop others from thinking we only complain and boast about America whenever...
I would, sorry that I talk so much, but at very great points, I would a little bit disagree. I think that the US is actually like above average in patriotism. But at the same time, I would say patriotism, if you are not ignorant and still say, hey, not my country is the best country in everything, we are the best in everything, right? But still see, okay, we could improve here, we could improve there, oh, they are better there, okay, cool, there's... is a very good thing. Why should you not be proud of your country, right? That is dumb. So I would agree and disagree with him in the same statement.
We travel abroad. This is largely anecdotal. In America, Americans like to complain just like the rest of us. Only a few of them ever even leave the country, so you're meeting an unrepresentative sample. But in their defense, many times, they're right. Yes, this can hit hard in the pride spot, but maybe Europeans could stand to smile a bit more, right? No? Okay, fine. Back to the apathetic, leave me alone face. By the way, that part was written for our European representative. By our European representative. I love all of you. Anyways, statistics viewed by outsiders show that the US is lagging behind. Similar to topics we've already discussed, there's another factor that we have to take into account: reporting. Every nation reports its own statistics. This means that making statistical comparisons between two developed nations, like the US and the UK, is an exercise in futility. The data is just too close and won't reveal much except that the US counts people one way and the US counts them another. That still doesn't make this misconception true. Americans are fake. Here's the thing. In Europe, citizens are almost proud of the fact that they're really standoffish. But once you get to know them, they're your friend for life. Well, yeah. Here's a newsflash. Once you get to know an American, they'll also be your friend for life. The thing is, though, they don't use this as an excuse to be a jerk in the beginning. This list sounds great coming from an American.
There I have to say, I know what he means, but, most Europeans don't want to be a jerk. I mean, some won't, but most of them just, it's just a different culture, right? It's just, we are very straightforward. We don't sugarcoat. Actually, I think that in many things that I like to be not sugarcoated. For example, if I want for, for example, feedback or something, I don't want, oh yeah, everything was great when it was shit. But at the same time, of course, I don't want that somebody treats me like shit, right?
I was totally the one who should have read this one, but I digress. On a totally different but very popular misconception, Americans are the only ones who call football soccer. Actually, a lot of the world calls it soccer. Even parts of Ireland still call it soccer. Oh, what do I mean by still? I'm glad you asked. It was actually the British who coined the term soccer. The word soccer is an abbreviation of association and first appeared in universities in the 1880s, sometimes using the variant spelled soccer with a K. The word is sometimes credited to Charles Redford Brown, an Oxford University student said to have been fond of shortened forms such as brekkers for breakfast and rugger for rugby football. Britain actually started using the word football in the late 20th century, possibly because people incorrectly saw it as an Americanism. This next one, Tristan couldn't believe. Could you not?
No.
I'm learning something. To our American viewers, did you know that people in Europe make fun of you for using air conditioning? Why do they need it? Why don't they just leave the window open? Mosquitoes, at least in Florida. But here's why they might be joining up.
I have never, we just make fun of us, that we are so dumb and, I have never heard somebody, oh my god, Americans use air conditioning. I have never heard such a joke, actually.
Soon. During the 2003 European heatwave, 70,000 people died. This was in large part due to the fact that European homes and buildings are not typically equipped with air conditioning. While they laugh at the Americans for this,
we do not. I mean, I am totally on the page here with the Americans. I would love if we have air conditioning, but it's just a thing that we somehow don't. But I'm totally on the American side here, and I think most Europeans are.
Summers are going to force them to take appropriate measures, especially since children and the elderly are very susceptible. Again, I stand by mosquitoes. I'm not opening my window in the summer. Winter, absolutely, open windows. Moving into the top 9, that's the weird number. Top 9. Many parts of the world accuse the United States of accounting for 25% of the world's carbon emissions. Not so nice. But it also accounts for 25% of the world's economic activity. The truth is that several nations, including countries like Canada, have higher per capita emissions than the US. Next, let's talk about how the world thinks Americans are ruining English. Actually, both British English and American English have diverged from a common 16th century ancestral standard, and in some ways, American English is closer to the original than British English. For example, American English has, for the most part, retained the language's rotosity, pronunciation of the R in words like hard, while British has, for the most part, dropped it. Furthermore, this shift in British English...
Interesting, because, Old English is basically very similar to Old German, and, basically English and German were pretty close to each other. So, and I would actually say that in total, American English is further away from German than British English is, at least if you speak it properly, because if there's some Manchester accent or something going on, then, yeah, I don't know what language this is, but Interesting.
Around the time of the American Revolution, when wealthier Londoners wanted to distinguish themselves from the lower classes. This is only one example, but it goes to show that British English is not an unchanging standard any more than American English.
Yeah.
On a totally different note, did you know that Americans don't all live in the suburbs? Nope, not true. The fact is that in America, you have plenty of people that live in cities like New York, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, and the list goes on. In fact, several regions of the United States are very European, like the Northeast.
I mean, what would the town, like suburb means before town, basically, right? So what would be in the town if nobody would live there? You know, then it would not be a town.
Corridor, for example. The difference between the US and Europe is that if you want to live in the suburbs in the US, you can, but you don't have to. Now, this next one is just offensive. Americans are all dumb rednecks. While there are certainly Americans who fit this stereotype, the vast majority don't. Most Americans live in cities near the coasts. Most of them are educated, and most of them are not very different from Europeans in any significant way. Every country has a less educated populace that they themselves make fun of.
Yeah.
Even sophisticated nations like Sweden and
We make fun of the people in our east. You know, East Germany.
Switzerland. Fair warning, the last 5 on our list get a bit dark and crazy, starting with the idea that America is imperialistic. In many parts of Europe, the United States is seen as an aggressive imperial power, even more so than Russia and China. This is largely because our military
Harshly disagree. No, especially with the last sentence. That we think sometimes that America should do less invasions and is a little bit imperialistic. And it says always that they are not, although they have, you know, they fought many wars, especially for oil. That is true. But I would not say like in the way from the UK that they actually annex land or anything. But nobody sees the US imperialistic as Russia or China. I mean, nobody, I would say.
Both in Europe and everywhere else. But in our strong defense, Americans never forced you to watch our movies, quarter our soldiers, obey our laws, or get permission to leave your own countries. It was the Russians that did that, and much, much more. Food for thought, after World War II, the Americans liberated and left. The Russians liberated and stayed. All right, number 4 is sure to be a shocker to a lot of foreigners. Americans don't actually all walk around with guns. It's just not true.
Way.
Except for a few places, the only people you'll ever see carrying guns in America are the police. In fact, you'll see more people walking around with
In Germany, every police officer has also a gun. I know in the UK they have not, which okay. I would rather have a police officer with a gun, to be honest, but okay.
In Switzerland than you ever would in America.
What does he have with Switzerland?
We admit that, like most stereotypes, there is some truth to this next one, but it's been wildly blown out of proportion. Americans are all crazy Christian right-wingers. There's something so right about saying it with that accent. Yes, there are a lot of Christians in America, and while some of them are crazy right-wingers, most of them aren't. In fact, if you ever get a chance to go and stay with one of those crazy
Actually, you know, until like a few years ago, I did not even, like, let's say 2 years ago or something, I did not even know that America is a very Christian country. I don't know. I never thought about this because, you know, I always thought about like South America is very Christian, but not America, like the United States. So yeah, and I mean, you know, we see this with like also the voting results, right? That not everybody is like far right. Otherwise, you know, Republicans or other candidates would always have 80-90%, right? Because, you know, that would be their candidate. So yeah, so it makes no sense.
Families, you'll see that most of them are just genuinely sweet people that go to church on Sundays. This next one sounds like a legit stand-up joke. If you get injured and can't pay for it, you'll just die in the street. Yeah, many people in Europe think this is what happens in America. As with most things that concern America, they're wrong. You can't be denied emergency medical care in the US. That would go against the Hippocratic Oath. The difference is that you get a bill in the mail a few months later.
I think yeah, I think they misunderstood this a little bit, because I think nobody in Germany thinks that, you know, they would let you die. But, you know, maybe some people would rather die than pay the bill.
Of course, debt is another issue, but let's get into that right now. Americans are all in debt. Actually, European citizens carry more debt than Americans. The average household debt in the US, OECD, is 113% of the household's income. In the UK, it's 156%. In Sweden, 173%. And in Denmark, it's a whopping 300.
Wait, what is it in Germany? I mean, Germany household debt 2024 was 2.4 billion US dollars. Okay, that's 2.4 billion, and our GDP was, I think, 4, right? GDP Germany 4.5. Okay, 2.4 divided by 4.5 is 50%. We are pretty good. Damn, we are good.
Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at list25. And as an American, I apologize for everything going on right now. Don't worry, 2020 is just around the corner.
Oh, it was not even 2020. Oh, bro. You don't want that 2020 happens, bro. You don't want that 2020 happens. You really don't want that 2020 happens. Poor guy. But that was really, really good. I probably have to cut a lot that the video goes to a good length, because I think I probably recorded, let's see, 40 minutes? Only 27? Crazy. I thought it's 40 minutes. Okay, then I probably don't have to cut so much. I hope you liked it, especially with all of the things that I said to this, and like, you know, with the explanations that I gave, because this was, I don't know who his European advisors were, but they were sometimes pretty inaccurate with some things. With some, they were very accurate. And yeah, I think in general, stereotypes, you know, especially with social media, gets always cooked up, because, you know, clicks, and the more dramatic you do something, the more clicks you get. And that is what counts, right? So yeah, but that is why I like such videos, because they put things into perspective. And I hope you liked it as well. Oh my God, those transitions, right? And yeah, until then, we see you. That did not make any sense. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it, and we see each other in the next video. Until then, keep liking, subscribing, and bye! Thank you so much to Todd Phillips and all of the other patrons and channel members for your support. You're awesome.